money like this.
Speaker, as I stand here in the House today, we have 20% of Canadians skipping meals because they can't afford the cost of food. 1.5 million going to food banks in a single month. Speaking of food banks, one food bank at Jane and Finch was forced to move because rent doubled. So food price inflation is driving people to the food bank, and rent price inflation is driving food banks out of the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Canadians tell pollsters that they are in the worst financial situation ever. Now, how do we get here? Well, the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest that we pay. Inflationary taxes have increased the cost for businesses to produce those goods and services. The more they spend, the more things cost. It's just inflation. Now, the government says they had no choice but to add this $500 billion to it. They had no choice but to double the debt or add more debt than all other governments in Canadian history combined. But we know that's not true, because the Parliamentary Budget Officer says that 40% of the new spending announced in the last 2 years alone had nothing to do with COVID. It was discretionary spending. And on top of that, the money that was linked to COVID was often wasted. The government paid CERB benefits out to people even when there was 500,000 vacant jobs and the economies had been totally reopened by provincial governments. They paid CERB checks to prisoners. Even federal public servants who were employed managed to get their hands on CERB checks at the same time. We also know that the government tried to give $500 million to the We Charity, only to be caught by Conservatives who held them to account. And now we learn that they spent $54 million on an app that we didn't need, that didn't work, and that could have been designed for $250,000. Madam Speaker, we looked into this. We wanted to know where the money went, who got rich. So the government tabled documents in the House that told us that among the contracted companies, one was Think On, which was paid $1.2 million for QR code experimentation. Only problem is that the company Think On said, "Dream on." We didn't get the money. They said, quote, "We have received no money from the CBSA." Now, the government has since put out a correction saying, whoops, we thought that we gave them $1.2 million. It turns out we didn't. That's a strange mistake to make. I mean, it's kind of hard to envision it happening, right? So, the government, did they put a check in the mail? They sent it to the wrong address? Did they get an invoice where the company asking for reimbursement for costs accidentally wrote the wrong name on the invoice? These are curiosities that will. No, they're not. They may well be, but we can tell one thing for sure. In fairness, Napoleon said, "Never ascribe to malice that which can be explained by incompetence." Right? Okay. So that is a plausible theory, right, for this government. But at the same time, we need to know the truth. When $54 million goes out the door and government officials can't get their story straight about where it went, the least we can do is have an audit.
Hear, hear.
Put the Auditor General in charge. Look into these costs. Find out who got the money, who got rich, and why we spent $54 million on an app that could have been designed for $250,000. Why did we waste this money when Canadians are paying so much? How could this government be so out of touch? We need answers. We need the truth. Support this motion, and let's get to that truth.